In my previous life, my husband mismanaged the business, leading to the company's bankruptcy. He, along with his mother-in-law and father-in-law, his eldest and second uncles, a total of 7 family members, took poison and committed suicide in front of me. I couldn't bear the shock and fainted. When I woke up again, the 7 family members of my husband had already been cremated. There was no time to grieve before the loan sharks came knocking for their money again. Only then did I realize that I had become the sole survivor of this family. 10 years later, when I tremblingly paid off the last debt with my own hands, I found the empty house once again filled with the figures of their 7 family members. Silas Sue threw $1 at my feet, thanking me for paying off their debts all these years. Watching the villain full of vigor, I finally couldn't hold back and spat blood, dying on the spot. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my husband went bankrupt. Silas Sue's tear-streaked face appeared before me, every word spoken with sobs and tears. Vesper, I know I have wronged you. It was my nepotism and poor management that led to the company's bankruptcy and the accumulation of enormous debts. He trembled as he took out a blue glass bottle, on which a simple and crude skull was drawn, as if afraid that others wouldn't know it was poison. Vesper, I'm sorry, we really have no way out and can only atone with our deaths. Saying that, he gave me a deep look, then resolutely raised the glass bottle and gulped it down heartily. Vesper, I hope you can forgive me. Silas Sue spat blood, collapsed to the ground struggling in pain, yet his eyes still deeply gazed at me. Seeing this scene so familiar in my memory, I suddenly came to my senses. It turned out that I was reborn to the day 10 years ago when the nightmare began, in my previous life. My husband acted recklessly, favoring only his relatives, and ruined the company. I pleaded countless times, but in the end, the 2 of us became enemies because of it. In a fit of anger, the 2 of them cut off all contact with each other. Unexpectedly, a year later, my husband showed up at the door with my father-in-law, mother-in-law, eldest uncle, second uncle, a total of 7 family members. My husband wept bitterly, filled with regret, and in front of me, drank poison, before dying. He desperately begged for my forgiveness. Before I could react, all 7 of them took poison and committed suicide together, creating an incredibly tragic scene. Watching my husband, who once loved me dearly, die painfully before my eyes, and our entire family of 7 perish at the same time. Tears streamed down my face. I not only forgave all of my husband's faults but also felt unbearable pain and deep regret. In the end, overwhelmed by sorrow, I fainted directly. When I woke up, I realized sister-in-law Sushi has already cremated their entire family of 7 at lightning speed. Before I could even recover from this immense grief, I was shocked to find that the loan shark's enforcers had already broken down the door. They were menacingly blocking the entrance, like fiends. It was only then that I was shocked to learn that Silas Sue had accumulated a debt of as much as 100 million, and I am the only debtor still alive in this entire family, even though I am extremely unwilling. Legally I must bear all the responsibility, or else I will end up behind bars. There was no other way. I had to sell off my villa and company to repay the debt. They even sold my parents' company and house together. Later, I worked day and night, doing 3 jobs by myself, living frugally, and it took me a full 10 years to pay off the last penny. Just as I trembled while paying off the last bit of money, thinking everything was over, I suddenly realized that the villa I sold back then was now home to a loving family. My husband changed his name and identity, embraced his new lover, and had a pair of adorable children to cherish at his feet. My father-in-law and mother-in-law smiled brightly, looking even younger than me, clearly living a very comfortable life. My heart immediately felt like it was being cut by a knife, bleeding profusely. I thought of my parents who died early 3 years ago from overwork while helping me repay debts. Thinking back on these 10 years of day and night toil, my hair has turned white at a young age, and I look haggard. Silas Sue held his charming little wife in his arms and drove off in a luxury car. Before leaving, he rolled down the car window, and the look in his eyes was like he was staring at a fool. He lightly tossed down a 1 yuan coin, which fell at my feet. This 1 yuan is to thank you for working hard to pay off our family's debts. Ha ha ha. Looking at the ugly, petty, and arrogant faces of the whole family, I felt as if 1,000 arrows pierced my heart. With a phut, He spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood and fell into eternal darkness. Smack. I was slapped hard across the face. Before I could even steady myself, sharp curses pierced my eardrums. You despicable wretch, a husband and wife share 100 days of grace. And you just stood there watching my brother die. I was slapped by my sister-in-law and suddenly opened my eyes wide. What came into view was my sister-in-law's venomous face. You heartless and malicious creature. My sister-in-law's voice was piercingly sharp. I looked up and saw my eldest sister-in-law and my sister-in-law rushing towards me, like two enraged she-wolves. Sister-in-law Sushi, with a big belly, eyes blazing with fire, looked at me with a venomous glare, pointing a finger at me and scolding angrily. It's all because of you, this cold-blooded woman, refusing to help us repay the debt, forcing our whole family to the brink of death. You are simply a demon. The provocatively dressed younger sister-in-law Sufei also stared at me with a face full of anger. Her finger, painted with bright red nail polish, even poked at the tip of my nose. You, how heartless you are, even if my brother had a quarrel with you. A day as husband and wife is worth 100 nights of grace. Do you really have to watch them all die before you feel satisfied? The barrage of accusations poured over me like a violent storm, leaving me no time to respond. I narrowed my eyes slightly, standing there silently, letting their insults wash over me, appearing as if stunned into silence. Yet inside, I let out cold sneers. It was the same in my previous life. Things happened so suddenly that I was stunned by the bodies lying all over the ground, completely at a loss. Just as I lunged forward to pick up my husband, my two so-called good sisters-in-law suddenly popped out like that. These two always looked at me with disdain, stirring up trouble every day and nitpicking over the smallest things. When my husband and I reached the point of never wanting to see each other again, these two also played a significant role. Now they are asking irrelevant questions and throwing all the dirty water on me. It was clearly Silas Su himself who ignored advice and went bankrupt due to poor management, but those who don't know might think I forced them to their deaths. Moreover, Silas Su and I have been separated for more than a year, and according to the previous agreement, after some more time, the marital relationship can be directly dissolved. Living my life over again, I finally understood that Silas Su had long planned this, deliberately timing it before our marriage was officially ended. So the whole family could fake their deaths and escape. It was all to make me naturally become the sole debtor. The entire family conspired and planned everything. First, the 7 of them suddenly claimed to have committed suicide together, crying out in despair, just when I was overwhelmed with fright. 2 more aunts took turns attacking me, a barrage that left me speechless and unable to defend myself. Looking back now, their actions were all interconnected, giving me no time to catch my breath, deliberately preventing me from having a moment to think. The insults and accusations from the 2 continued, with Su Shi and Su Fei standing on either side of me, blocking my view completely. Vesper Su, if it weren't for the fact that my brother loves you so much, I would have called the police and had you arrested today. Vesper Su, give me back my brother, give me back my parents. May you meet a terrible end. At this moment, my parents also arrived and saw the bodies scattered all over the ground and the blood. My already timid mother suddenly collapsed to the ground. Sitting down, father was also staggering, his face ashen. My heart ached deeply. Surely my own parents must have been terrified at this moment. The Su family truly had a cruel scheme. Any kind-hearted person seeing the scene of this entire family of 7 meeting their doom on the spot would be shocked. In their past life, the whole family was thrown into chaos, completely at the mercy of the Su family, completely unaware that I had been walking step by step into their trap. Thinking of this, a subtle curve appeared at the corner of my mouth. Surely even heaven could not tolerate Silas Su's heinous deeds, and granted me a chance to be reborn. Since that is the case, I absolutely cannot waste such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to thoroughly clear every ounce of shame I have suffered. My gaze passed through Sue's strands of hair and saw Silas Su lying on the ground in a ridiculous and distorted posture, with red paint spewed from his mouth, staining the ground, looking shocking. In my previous life, it was this bright red that pierced my eyes, and I never opened them carefully to take a closer look. Clearly, they died from poisoned hair, yet each of them had rosy complexions and bright lips, as if they were merely asleep. It was only later, When I ended up working as a caregiver in a hospital, that I found out that people who were poisoned to death not only had dark bluish faces and purple lips, but also foamed at the mouth and had bulging eyes. The appearance was extremely terrifying. Unfortunately, at that time, I was just a well-behaved girl who grew up smoothly under the protection of my parents, knowing nothing at all. Even a little bit of trouble can scare me out of my wits, let alone a big matter involving 7 lives. Silas Sue, how cruel you are. Why did you just leave me like this? I originally wanted to squeeze out a few tears to put on a show, but when I thought of all the bitter days in the past, my heart was filled with endless grievances, and tears streamed down uncontrollably. I suddenly let out a cry and rushed past Sophie, lunging towards Silas Sue's body on the ground. My only purpose in doing this was to find out whether Silas Sue was pretending to be asleep, or if he had really been knocked unconscious by something. The 2 daughters of the Sue family never expected that I would suddenly go mad and rush out. Sophie was also suddenly pushed aside by me, and in her panic, she flailed her hands wildly, accidentally pulling her pregnant sister along. The 2 were so scared that cold sweat broke out on them. It took a lot of effort for them to hold each other and stand firm. By the time we reacted, we realized I was already kneeling on the ground, clutching Silas Sue's neck with both hands, shaking him vigorously up and down. Vesper Sue, you're crazy. My brother is already dead, and you still want to treat him like this. Susie was terrified and was about to rush over to stop it when she felt a sharp pain in her stomach, hurriedly covered it and stood still, cursing angrily under her breath. I turned a deaf ear, fiercely grabbing Silas Sue by the neck while smashing his head against the ground. Thud, thud, thud. The dense sound of impacts made my scalp tingle. Just hearing it was enough to know how painful it was. Silas Sue, you bastard. Wake up. Don't scare me like this anymore. Please wake up. I kept cursing non-stop, but to outsiders, it only seemed like I had momentarily lost my mind from the pain. At this moment, Sophie finally reacted and hurried over to pull me up. I did not resist, a faint smile appearing at the corner of my downturned lips. I have completely figured it out. Silas Sue, to enhance the effect, indeed took some kind of anesthetic drug and fell into a deep coma. The others must have had the same effect. I didn't expect these people to really spare no expense to trap me. Vesper Sue, you bastard, you want to kill me. No, you want to desecrate my brother's corpse. Sophie was so angry that she almost let something slip, but quickly covered it up and slapped me angrily. With a smack sound, half of my face turned red, leaving 5 clear fingerprints, but I wasn't angry. Instead, I looked at Sophie with a strange smile. Sophie gasped in fright, her heart almost stopping its beat. I was crying and laughing at the same time, looking completely insane, clearly having been subjected to a great shock, my mind somewhat unhinged. Just then, the sound of urgent sirens blared outside, and an ambulance rushed over in a hurry. Before it even came to a complete stop, a young male doctor in a white coat hurriedly jumped out and rushed straight into the hall. Without waiting for any instructions, he immediately lunged toward the person lying on the ground and began a skilled examination. Pupils dilated, heartbeat stopped, no pulse, clear symptoms of death by poisoning. The male doctor wore a serious expression. A string of professional terms burst out, clearly and definitively announcing the death of Silas Sue. Seeing him appear, a trace of restrained joy involuntarily showed on Sophie's glamorous face. It was only long after that I happened to learn that the emergency doctor named Wushuda was actually Sophie's boyfriend. It was just that the 2 families had long since ceased contact, so they were unaware of this matter. Wushuda's identity was something the Sue family had planned long ago. It was also the most crucial part of their scheme to fake his death and escape. I sneered inwardly and deliberately said anxiously to Wushuda, "Doctor, my husband shouldn't be dead yet. Please, try to save him." Wushuda looked at me with a serious expression. "Madam, please restrain your grief. This is a professional examination. There is absolutely no mistake." Saying this, he even reached out and pushed me aside a little. "Please step aside and do not obstruct my work. Perhaps there are still living patients among the others." Listening to his righteous words, all I felt was a cold sneer in my heart. It was this very noble and righteous emergency doctor who helped Silas Sue and his family of 7 forge fake death certificates. It also led me completely into this vicious trap. I obediently stepped aside, watching as he finished examining each one, then solemnly announced the death of all 7 members of the Su family. I secretly turned on the recording function on my phone, then walked over to Dr. Wu again. Doctor, please take a good look. I think they are just unconscious, not dead. Please look again, I beg you. Tears streaming down my face, I grabbed Wu Shuda's arm and shook it hard. A trace of guilt flashed across Wu Shuda's face, but fortunately, Sophie rushed over to rescue him at that moment. What do you mean by I? My whole family was killed because of you, and you still dare to deny it. She habitually threw dirt on me, trying to trap me with such words. No, little sister. I really think your brother and the others aren't dead yet. Look, your brother's arm is still limp. Also, I think I just saw Mom's eyelid twitch, I said anxiously, which startled Sophie and Susie, and they quickly stopped me. Sister-in-law, you must be mistaken. You must be too heartbroken and having hallucinations. Besides, he is a certified emergency doctor. How could he not tell life from death, in a moment of desperation? Sophie even played the emotional card and reluctantly called me sister-in-law. As Sophie spoke, she quickly signaled Wu Shuda to hurry up and issue the death certificate to avoid any complications. Wu Shuda, sweating coldly, quickly took out the prepared death certificate and began filling it out swiftly with his pen. Death certificates were issued by him so easily. A cold smile curled at the corner of my mouth. In just that moment, I had already figured out how to take my revenge. Silas Su wanted to play dead, then I'll make sure he really dies. The key to the Su family's betrayal of me was this death certificate, and the key to my revenge is also this death certificate. As long as I have it, I can, as the wife, openly and rightfully send them to the crematorium and consign them to the flames. At this moment, Wu Shuda had already prepared the death certificates and handed them directly to me. These are their death certificates. Look carefully, in my past life. This thick stack of death certificates was the last straw that broke my fragile nerves. The pain became unbearable, and I fainted immediately. Now, looking at this stack of death certificates, my heart blossoms with joy. This is the scepter that leads me on the path of revenge, the sharpest sword in my hand. No, this can't be true. You're lying to me, aren't you? Doctor, shouldn't you check again carefully to see if there's been a mistake, to strengthen the effect and completely trap Wu Shuda? I grabbed his arm again, pretending to cry out. Wu Shuda broke out in a cold sweat on his forehead and quickly reached out to pull my arm away. Not daring to look at me, he shouted guiltily, "What nonsense are you talking about? How could I possibly make a mistake? That's absolutely impossible." Sophie and Susie quickly came over to hold me back. Sister-in-law, you're too upset. Don't make things difficult for the doctor. What I wanted was exactly what Wu Shuda said. So I obediently let go of his arm. So many people dying at the same time. I'm afraid it will be hard to explain later. How about we call the police first? I looked terrified, which almost drove Su Qian and Sophie to the brink of madness. No, the two almost blurted out at the same time. If the police come, won't it be impossible to keep the whole family of 7 playing dead a secret? Why, they died in my house. What if you say I murdered them? What am I supposed to do then? I deliberately asked, pretending not to understand. How could that be? Sister-in-law, we all know they committed suicide. There are only the 2 of us left in the Su family. Who would meddle and try to frame you? Sophie racked her brains to explain, while Susie was more direct, pointing at me and started scolding. Vesper Su, what do you mean by that? They have already died miserably enough, and you still want the police to dissect them? You are too heartless. A long string of moral reasoning was thrown at me, and I immediately fell silent. Well, since that's the case, we won't wait any longer, I said as I took out my phone and directly dialed a number. Hello, is this the crematorium? There has been a sudden major mass poisoning incident here, 7 people involved. We need you to send a vehicle immediately. Yes, death certificates have already been issued. All family members are present with no objections. The address is 128 Jianglin Road. Don't ask me how I know the phone number of the crematorium. Later, when I was down and out doing odd jobs, I even worked as a corpse carrier at the crematorium, because the pay there was especially high, and no one else was willing to do it. At first, Susie and Sophie were both completely confused, not knowing what I was up to. Upon hearing this, the 2 of them suddenly realized that this despicable woman intended to burn their entire family. No, you tell them not to come now. Sophie shouted at me. her face twisted with emotion. I completely ignored her and slammed the phone down with a click. Turning around to look at me, he asked with a puzzled expression, "Little sister, why? The family members died so tragically. I really can't bear to watch. Do you want them to just lie on the floor like that forever?" "No, that's not what I meant." Sophie was suddenly at a loss for words, not knowing how to continue, and quickly glanced at Susie for help. She quietly pointed at the water cup, and Sophie immediately understood, quickly pretending to be concerned as she said, "Sister-in-law, you're too heartbroken. You need to take care of yourself too. I'll go get you a glass of water." Saying that, she ran to get the water cup, while Sushi hurriedly blocked my view. "Vesper Sue, don't be anxious about this for now. We're here, as daughters of the Sue family. How could we just stand by and do nothing?" Just then, Sophie came over carrying a glass of water and said gently, "Sister-in-law, quickly drink some warm water to soothe your throat. You're the only family we have left, so you absolutely must stay safe." If I didn't know the truth of the matter, I would surely be moved to tears with gratitude. I even thought my sister-in-law finally saw me as her sister-in-law. I am sure there is something wrong with this glass of water. It must be their backup plan prepared long ago. In my past life, I was useless and passed out early, never waiting for them to use this method. I took the glass with trembling hands and quietly thanked me. "Thank you, little sister." Then slowly brought the glass to his lips. Through the reflection beside the glass, I clearly saw the expectant eyes of the Sue sisters and the strange smile at the corners of their lips. I sneered in my heart. And at that moment, my hand trembled, and the glass fell to the ground with a crack, shattering instantly. What do you mean?" Sophie was furious, her eyebrows raised sharply, as if she wanted to knock me out with a single punch. "This woman is really like a cockroach. No matter what, she can't be crushed." "Sorry. I didn't mean to." My hand was shaking badly. I weakly apologized repeatedly, and Sushi quickly grabbed her sister, afraid that I would become suspicious. Just then, the sound of a car came from outside the door, and a team of staff walked in. "Hello, we are from the crematorium. May I ask if these bodies on the ground are the ones to be handled?" I lifted a face full of sorrow and weakly nodded. "Yes, these are their death certificates, issued by this emergency doctor. Normally, Wu Daming should have left immediately after issuing the death certificates, but he stayed put just to cooperate with Sophie. No, they can't take them away yet." Susie was extremely anxious. The person at the crematorium was taken aback. "Do you still need the police to get involved? After all, 7 lives were lost, and all were unnatural deaths, so they dared not take it lightly." "That's not the case. They did indeed commit suicide by poison due to the company's bankruptcy. I am their daughter, so there is no problem at all," Susie quickly said, fearing they might cause trouble by calling the police. The person in charge frowned. "Since there are no problems, if you continue to leave it here, and it's the height of summer now, then I will have no choice but to request the Epidemic Prevention Department to intervene." No, the 2 sisters of the Sue family kept waving their hands. This was truly one thing after another. It was clearly all planned. So how could there be so many loopholes now? "I am the wife and daughter-in-law of the deceased. You might as well take it away now. At worst, we can stop at the crematorium first and decide after the memorial service." Seeing that the Sue sisters were about to faint from anxiety, my words undoubtedly gave us a glimmer of hope. The 2 exchanged a glance, feeling that this was not a bad idea, as long as it wasn't cremated immediately. Yes. We also agree to take it away now." Hearing this, a subtle curve appeared at the corner of my mouth. "As long as we go to the crematorium, I am most familiar with the procedures there. Everything will be out of your hands." After obtaining the consent of all the family members, the crematorium staff stopped wasting time and immediately began transporting the body. "By the way, please send a direct family member along with the vehicle. We still have some paperwork to complete." After loading the car, the person in charge came over to ask. As soon as Sushi heard this, she quickly said, "I'll go," and didn't argue with me. Instead, she held my hand and gave me a long series of instructions. "Big sister, please take care of Mom, Dad, and Silas Sue. I also need your help organizing the memorial service." Saying this, she began to cry, tears welling up as she covered her face, just as the car was about to start. Susie quickly broke free from my arm and walked towards the car, while I calmly stretched out my toe. Ouch! In her haste, Susie lost her footing and fell to the ground. Immediately clutching her stomach and groaning loudly, "Sister, what's wrong?" Sophie was terrified and quickly rushed over to help me up, but Susie was in too much pain to straighten up. "Oh no, could it be a miscarriage? Hurry, take her to the hospital. Isn't there an ambulance right here?" I called out, pretending to be concerned. Yes, Wu Shuda, come quickly and help carry my eldest sister into the car," in the urgency of the moment. Sophie also forgot to hide the relationship between me and the doctor. Susie was extremely anxious, grabbing Sophie's hand and urgently signaling to me with her eyes. "Sophie, you go to the crematorium instead of me." "All right, don't worry, I'm with Mom and Dad, that woman won't be able to cause any trouble." Sophie looked vicious, and in my heart, I was just a useless naive fool, easily manipulated however they wanted. Watching the ambulance speed away, I curled my lips. Among the Su sisters, only Su Qian still had some sense. Sophie was just a paper tiger, all bark and no bite, very easy to deal with. Seeing the crematorium urging them on, Sophie flusteredly climbed onto a funeral vehicle, and I leisurely got on the last vehicle. The person in that car is my husband, Silas Su. Looking at that sleeping face, I can't help but feel that this man really has a good appearance. I am a complete appearance-oriented person. When he deliberately courted and pursued me back then, I had absolutely no resistance. Now that I think about it, the Su family had long planned to take over the Shen family's fortune. I looked at the person in charge sitting in front of me. "Hello, may I ask if there is any procedure I need to follow to arrange their cremation earlier?" I said, then explained further to the other party. "With such a big incident, I'm worried it might attract those reporters. Your crematorium probably wouldn't want to be disturbed either, right? The memorial service can be held after the cremation." The person in charge nodded in understanding. "Normally, you might be scheduled for tomorrow, but the situation is special. If we go through a special procedure, it can be arranged immediately." I immediately nodded in comprehension. They all took poison, and I don't want to see them in such a miserable state. Let's go through the special procedure, no matter the cost. The person in charge's eyes lit up. This was a big business deal. He immediately dialed the manager's phone, and sure enough, it was confirmed quickly. "Mrs. Shen, how about this? We expedite your order, start roasting in an hour, and the cost will be 15,000 per person. Does that work for you?" "An hour? That's definitely not acceptable. The longer the delay, the more variables there would be." So I made an immediate decision, speaking as I handed the person a stack of money. "How about this? If you cremate immediately, I'll add another 10,000 per person. You all know my eldest sister-in-law has run into trouble, and I urgently need to go back to take care of her." Hearing the price doubled and realizing he had another personal debt, the person in charge gritted his teeth. "Mrs. Shen, please wait a moment. I'll communicate with the manager again." I nodded, not worried at all. The other party would definitely agree. Sure enough, it wasn't long before they responded again, agreeing to start the furnace for them immediately. I smiled inside, but with a face full of sorrow. I pointed at my husband and said, "My husband usually cares a lot about his appearance, and now like this. I believe he wouldn't want it either. Can he be the first one to come?" The person in charge gave me a sympathetic glance. It seemed their marriage was quite good. And it was truly tragic that the whole family died. Moreover, such a trivial matter is completely insignificant to him. No problem. The funeral vehicle drove all the way to the suburban crematorium. Looking at the familiar houses ahead, I couldn't help but feel a surge of emotions. In this life, I will personally send Shenyi to hell. From now on, I will live my life happily and joyfully, never again sinking to the point of carrying corpses in places like this. Familiar with the crematorium procedures, I went straight to the incinerator, and Sophie was still foolishly following them to handle the formalities. Watching Silas Su's body being slowly pushed in, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction. "Silas Su, weren't you pretending to be dead? Then I'll grant you that." I pretended to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, but saw his eyelids twitch slightly. It seems his sedative is about to wear off. Luckily, I acted in time, otherwise he would have gotten up right away. I know that at this moment his consciousness is already semi-awake, able to hear himself speak, so I deliberately leaned close to his ear and whispered softly, "Silas Su, I know you're pretending, but it doesn't matter, I'll personally send you on your way, rest assured. As expected, I successfully saw the other person's finger twitch slightly. Surely at this moment, his heart must be pierced by 1,000 arrows, just like mine was back then. Watching him being slowly pushed into the incinerator, a sense of otherworldly relief surged through my heart. Just as the staff was about to press the button, urgent shouting sounded from outside the door. "No, wait, don't cremate him yet." It was Sophie's voice, and immediately the door was slammed open with a loud bang, causing everyone to turn around in shock. Quick as a flash, I seized this one and only chance to press the button. We've come this far even joking around. How could I possibly give Silas Sue a chance to come back to life? Stop, don't cremate him yet. Sophie, her hair disheveled and drenched in sweat, shouted hoarsely at the top of her lungs. The staff all stared at me in shock. No one noticed that inside the crematorium, Silas Sue was flailing his arms and legs, struggling desperately, but unfortunately, he was swallowed by the flames in an instant. This scene was incredibly satisfying to the heart. It seemed Silas Sue's sedative had completely worn off, leaving him fully conscious as he was burned alive. It was truly gratifying. "No, brother." Obviously, Sophie, who was facing the incinerator, also saw this scene and let out a piercing and agonizing scream. Struggling, she rushed towards the incinerator but was stopped by the staff. "Miss Sue, please accept our condolences. We understand your pain, but you cannot disrupt our work," the staff said righteously. "No, my brother is not dead yet. Please stop." The staff turned around but saw nothing, and said displeased, "Miss Sue, please don't talk nonsense. We certainly wouldn't cremate a living person." Just then, stumbling footsteps sounded at the door. "Wait, my son is not dead yet." An old woman stumbled in a complete mess, probably still not fully sober from the effects of the medicine, barely able to walk steadily. A daytime resurrection scam. Even the crematorium staff were terrified, screaming repeatedly for a moment. Staring at the roaring flames inside the cremation furnace, the old woman suddenly collapsed to the ground. Then I looked at myself with a face full of hatred. "You wicked woman, you literally burned my son to death." "Mom, the doctor already issued a death certificate, if you can bring him back to life. It can only be called a miracle," I explained through my tears. I felt deeply regretful, never expecting that old woman's physical condition to be so good. If it had been a little later, she would have been sent to the crematorium. But this is fine too, letting me watch my own son die right before my eyes. Carrying so much debt for the rest of my life is actually worse than death. "Son, you died so tragically, you wicked woman, this is clearly murder." The old woman had just been ravaged by a sedative, and upon waking, she suffered such a heavy blow that she immediately collapsed, unable to hold on any longer. Sophie was also terrified and quickly picked up her mother, causing the scene to erupt into chaos. Because of this unexpected turn of events, the others could no longer continue the cremation. But to me, that no longer mattered. The first thing I did was call my father. "Dad, listen to me. Silas Sue and his family are faking their deaths. They owe 100 million in high-interest loans and want me to take the fall." These things only became clear to me 10 years later in my previous life. But now I won't let them happen again. Among the debt, tens of millions were just borrowed recently, intended for their own extravagance. You need to immediately find someone to investigate and get the money back. My father was originally a somewhat well-known local entrepreneur. If it weren't for me falling in love with a man from a humble background and losing a lot of money to scams, it's not to the point where I can't even repay 100 million in high-interest loans. Upon hearing my words, he immediately came to his senses. "Vesper, don't worry, I'll take care of this right away." After entrusting the matter to my father, I waited calmly for the police to arrive. I will use this time to hold back everyone in the Sue family, so they won't have the chance to transfer the funds. Lives were at stake, and the police soon arrived at the scene. After an investigation, the Sue family's collective pretense of poisoning themselves could no longer be concealed. It was proven that Silas Sue was indeed burned alive. But the crematorium bore no responsibility, as everything followed proper procedures. Moreover, the situation was chaotic at the time, and no one knew exactly who pressed the button. Wu Shuda and the Sue family can no longer hide the matter of forging the false certificate, and the recording in my hand perfectly absolves me of any responsibility. "You bastard, why did you issue a fake death certificate? Why did you kill my husband? He was still so young," I blurted out first. Rushing forward to punch Wu Shuda, "It wasn't me, it was all Sophie who made me do it. I was forced to." Wu Shuda knew his medical career was completely ruined, and he was also facing imprisonment. He looked at Sophie with venomous hatred, determined to drag her down with him no matter what. "You bastard, it was your rotten idea. If it weren't for you, how could our family have come up with such a plan? How could my brother have died?" Sophie was originally thoughtless. She blurted out curses and revealed everything. I cried beside them, tears streaming down like rain, looking pitiful and delicate. "It's all because of you that my husband died." I also know how to frame others and speak in veiled words. From beginning to end, I was a pitiful victim, completely unaware, being toyed with by an entire family. As for my private request to pay extra for cutting in line, no one at the crematorium dares to admit it to avoid taking responsibility. Except for Silas Su, the rest of the Su family was saved. However, after leaving the hospital, they would face an even more embarrassing situation. There was a high-interest loan debt of up to 100 million, along with charges of conspiring to fake death to evade responsibility, falsifying company accounts, and other crimes. Susie had already suffered a miscarriage, and then she heard about these distressing matters at home. In her anger and anxiety, the child also died in the womb. Not only was Wu Shuda's medical license revoked, but he was also prosecuted for issuing fake certificates and attempting to harm others. Saying this, he gave me a deep look. Young pursued accountability afterward, including myself. There are a total of 7 debtors in the company. I am the only one who never participated in any operations, yet the court discretionarily assigned me a debt of 10 million, and at the first moment, Father Shen traced 50 million from Silas Su's secret account. The funniest thing is that this secret account was actually opened in my name, and I didn't even have to change my name. On the day Silas Su was buried, with drizzling rain, some of the Su family were busy, some were sick, and not a single person came to see him off. I held a black umbrella, standing quietly in front of his tombstone, my gaze calm and distant. "Silas Su, rest assured, I will spend the remaining 40 million well on your behalf." A trace of joyful smile slowly appeared in my eyes. "I will find someone I love, have 2 adorable children, enjoy family happiness with my parents, and see all the beautiful scenery in this world." Looking at the black and white photo on the tombstone, I murmured softly, "So it's all your own doing, your self-inflicted misery. Unbearable to live." I sneered coldly and let go, allowing the black umbrella in my hand to be blown away, as if carrying away all the suffering of my past life. Those unbearable years can no longer haunt my dreams. I looked up, the rain had cleared. A brilliant ray of sunlight shone on my exquisitely beautiful profile. I flashed a bright smile and turned to walk briskly towards my parents in the distance, where a whole new life awaits me.